Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today, 5 Keys to Good IT Service Design. A few notes before we start. Your phone lines are muted today, so if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat panel, and please address them to all presenters. That way I can field the questions and assign them. Secondly, Jeff is doing the demo later on, so you might find it helpful to go to full screen mode. And if you do this now, that will help very much when he gets to his demo. You can find that up in the toolbar of your Ready to Talk conference control. And lastly, we are sending out the recording after this event. So keep an eye out for your email from Ready to Talk, and it will have the recording link as well as the slides. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen. Don?
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen, and with me is my normal co-host and co-presenter, Jeff Benedict, who heads up our ITSM practice as well as our innovation efforts. If you're new to our webinar series, welcome. If you're a past attendee, thanks for joining us again. Our goal, as always, is to share valuable information and insights you can use in your planning and activity right now. The topic we'll talk about today is 5 keys to good IT service design. Here's our agenda. After a very little bit about Evergreen, we'll dive into it. And beyond that, we'll briefly demonstrate some of the concepts we discuss in our always evolving view of an advanced employee self-service portal and catalog experience, which is built on ServiceNow. Evergreen is a U.S.-based consulting firm, and we've worked with hundreds of mid-market, Fortune 1000, and public sector organizations to improve their IT service management execution. Over the past 20 years, we've delivered more than 4,000 IT service management projects. We are a full lifecycle firm, meaning we have both process and technology consulting in the same company. We are also one of a few top-tier or gold U.S. ServiceNow partners. Since we are also a certified application developer and develop solutions on the platform, we get very early access to upcoming ServiceNow releases. For example, we began beta testing about 6 months before a release hits the public. This insight can help our customers make better long-term decisions. Our clients tell us this is the biggest problem that they have. They can't meet their ServiceNow demand. Here's what they say to us. It exceeds our resources, but it has peaks and valleys too. Skilled resources are scarce. It takes 6 months for someone to become capable, and then they may get hired away. Also, we may not have an actual true solution architect to help lead us. Even with expensive consultants like Evergreen, contracts, task orders, and invoicing are a lot of work. We educate these folks on our business, and then they're gone. This is how most of us try to handle this. A core internal ServiceNow team augmented by outside consultants on a project-by-project basis with possible offshore technical support. We're so used to doing it this way that we may not even stop to think how hard and inefficient this motion actually is. We think the traditional services approach is broken, especially in the new world of agile software development. We created Evergreen Evolve to fix it. There's a huge amount of waste in project-based activity that neither you or I benefit from. Due to scheduling issues, it's hard for us as a consulting firm to get resources billable more than 70 or 75% of the time. So 25% gets wasted. We have a saying in consulting, the first project with the correct scope is the second one. And people usually laugh when I say that, but we all know it's true. So another 15 to 20% gets lost in risk allowance to account for scope issues, the fact that we don't understand each other, okay? And when we add that all together, it's an astounding total of 40 to 45% waste. This is why the market rates for services, consulting services, are so high. Evergreen Evolve is a part to full-time team of senior, implementation certified ServiceNow experts specifically dedicated to you over a 6-month period. So our team and your team can become one team. You get dedicated U.S. thought leadership and our engagement managers and our senior solution architects who work closely with our offshore team of, again, dedicated senior certified developers. So Evolve gives you one flexible contract with a dedicated team, one solution to help meet both your ServiceNow tactical and strategic project demand. Now, you may be paying $180 to $220 an hour today for these kind of skills. Because Evolve captures the huge amount of waste, we can pass the savings on to you in very low rates, averaging from $65 to $118 per hour for the exact same people that you may engage with us or people that we compete with in the $180 to $220 hour range. Best of all, there is no long-term lock-in. You can cancel an Evolve arrangement at any time with 30 days notice. Okay, so that's my commercial for today. Let's jump right into it. I like to keep webinars simple and the content and the points simple, but some of the slides today are not simple. I dipped into our consulting toolbox for them. At the same time, I'm pretty excited about this because I think this set has very high immediate reference use or reference value for you. So we will stay high level and I'll touch key points, but I hope you will want to use these tools. Of course, if you want to know more about them or you have any questions about them, you can imagine we'll be happy to talk to you. I have two idle definitions today. A service is something of value you do for someone, and all they have to do is receive it. A service design package or process is the cookbook you follow to build and maintain a high-quality service. It's hard to coordinate services across IT from request to outcome. Each silo has hundreds of tools and processes refined over years to manage and deliver their specific outcomes. The work itself is often very complex and substantially undocumented, and tribal knowledge plays a significant role in getting it done. Each silo is the same in nature, but the tools, processes, and the knowledge are unique, silo to silo. So a service can be very complex. By the way, if you're wondering, this is a workflow chart from Pinterest. Here is research from the Office of Consumer Affairs on why customers leave. 3% move, 19% have issues with the product, 9% are price sensitive, and 69% leave because of poor service. That's over 2/3. That's really mind-blowing. But we have an advantage in IT. Our customers can't leave. They have to come to us. This may be true in the short run, but perhaps not in the long. More and more, customers find shadow IT alternatives, or they complain to executives that IT doesn't provide clear value or poor value, so IT budgets get cut, and finally, IT may even get outsourced. So stop and think for a minute. If your customers love you and think your services are great, are you as likely to have your budget cut or be outsourced? Not hardly. These customers in the picture are so unhappy with us, they are literally walking out into the desert to get away. With what we'll cover today, using a service design process will look like a lot of work. Why can't we just start building services and giving them out to customers? The most important reason why not is that the customers will hate us. Customer satisfaction is driven by setting and meeting expectations. If we raise the bar of expectation in that we're going to offer better or maybe even great services and then deliver bad or inconsistent experiences, customers will actually be more angry than if we had done nothing at all. A service design process is like the assembly line of an auto manufacturer. It's your service's assembly line. Stop and visualize that assembly line in your mind's eye for just a moment. From request to outcome, with many providers collaborating and coordinating to deliver a consistent, affordable, repeatable, manageable, and high-quality outcome. Perhaps IT is too complex to be able to do this. Maybe, but consider this. GM builds 9.9 million transmissions every year using over 400 suppliers with a Six Sigma level of quality. Are we more complex than that? A good service design process is very strategic. Technology fuels competitive advantage. So why shouldn't we put a good assembly line underneath our business? Now let's take a look at the actual service design process and the components that go into it. Here's a very simplified view of an IT service design package for a service we're calling virtual meeting collaboration. We have a description that everyone can understand, who can access the service, who owns and manages the service, and the more detailed functionality of the service. Then we find the underlying elements we need to make the service fly, like the SLAs and the OLAs, cost, and supporting teams. A good, consistent service design process is critical for customer satisfaction, simplicity, and quality. Here we have an IT service where we provide business analytics. There's a brief description of the service offered so I can decide if this is what I'm looking for. I can see that Don Goodliff is the service owner if I need to contact someone, and I can see that it's rated 3 out of 5 stars for quality. Now, of course, you don't have to publish your quality stats right away, but ultimately it's where we've got to get to. The rest of the world is living with 5-star quality. I think we have to do the same thing. I can click on 3 different request items if I want to take an action, and if I need further detail to make a decision, I can click on the tabs at the bottom, not to mention frequently asked questions and other factors we can show around the service on the screen. A good service design goal is to provide enough information so a customer can decide on their own if they want the service and then be able to take action. While this isn't always possible, it is what we should aim for. We call this customer view a service tombstone because it summarizes what lies below. We often look to Amazon for best practices examples. Here's an Amazon tombstone for a Shun Santoku knife. I like these knives, but they're very expensive, so I don't have any yet, but I do like to look at them. This provides enough information to facilitate a self-service decision, or non-decision on my part, and even has 3 different service offerings, a 5.5-inch knife, a 7-inch knife, and a 7-inch Sumo version. I'm assuming that the Sumo one is more heavy duty. As part of the overall service design process, here are the high-level steps we take to build an individual service to the point where it's ready to be put into service. We go from how it will be presented to the customer, to what is included, to how we deliver it behind the scenes, to how we get feedback, and to how we build it for manageability. ServiceNow Service Portal gives us the ability to create new requests and supporting workflows easily and quickly. It's a powerful capability. But that can also create a problem. You can quickly build hundreds of requests and services, all with a unique look and feel. Your customers won't like that. Think about Amazon. As customers, we love the fact that it is a consistent end-to-end customer experience every single time. In fact, we are so used to it that we don't even have to think about it to use it. We virtually have it in our hands. I buy things at stoplights. Your customers will expect a consistent customer experience. So we extend Service Portal with a consistent service design process, which easily flows into a consistent and complete service and request presentation that your customers see. Now, those of you who have been to a number of our webinars, you've probably seen this slide many times before. It's a foundational kind of slide. A proper service design process has 3 constituents: the customer, the providers, and the managers, and all must be involved and have their needs met to create any truly viable service. The customer wants a great customer experience, and to deliver that, we must think like the customer and design from the customer in, not IT out, or they'll reject it. The provider wants execution effectiveness, and if we don't build in a way that it makes them more efficient and effective, then they're going to work around it. They won't support the change. With the customers, hey, call me, email me, don't use that system, it's too complex. The manager wants governance and accountability. Without these, we cannot price and deliver our service consistently with high quality. And what's really key here is we've got to deliver the whole portfolio of services that way, not just the individual ones. So here's where a few of the slides get kind of busy, and we're going to go another level deeper. Without a consistently understood and applied service design process, by definition, you'll build inconsistent and maybe poor services, and you will likely fail in your customer's eyes. This is a tool you can use to share what the service design model is made up of and the big basket of benefits that it actually brings to you. With it, you can get people to understand what a service is end to end, see their role in it, get the parts, lower resistance to change, and the most magic bullet of all, get people to understand why are we doing this. Going a little deeper into this tool supports the last slide, providing the consistent word picture for each service design model area. Yes, it's a lot of words, but this is a reference chart you can use and share to help create consistent understanding and prevent a lot of questions and confusions. So this is kind of I call it a Rosetta Stone tool for the service design process and model. And it looks like a racy kind of chart. Across the top, we have the factors that must be considered in the service design model. Down the left-hand side, we have the component areas in the service design process needed to build a good service. So then across in the middle, we have the function, tool, or process that ensures the points get connected. When you look at it this way, it's not hard to see how building solid, reusable pieces in the middle can help you build high-quality, complete, and consistent services much more quickly. I hope you guys will want to use this chart. We use it in delivery every day. Along with that last framework slide, this tool is like a visual checklist to help us make sure we're getting all the inputs we need and delivering all the outputs that are required for high value. Okay, that wasn't so bad. Now, I promised that we would highlight 5 keys to good service design. But as I spent time on this, I came up with 7 that, even though I boiled them and boiled them, they still seem like they were worth sharing. So I have 7. But don't worry, they're actually easy to understand and easy to apply. Our first key is clear service ownership. Here's a service that we looked at before. Don Goodliff is the service owner. Now this is a simple point, but it can cause a huge change in IT. You see Don's name published right next to the customer quality rating. Do you think that Don will be thinking about end-to-end services and happy customers? You bet he will. Here's an Evergreen design principle at the bottom in orange. If everyone owns the service, no one does. Excuse me. Next, we want to make sure we clearly understand the difference between requests and services. It's not unusual for us to start work with a new customer who claims to have hundreds or even thousands of services. But what they really have is lots of requests, a request catalog. For example, you could have 400 or 500 access requests alone for different applications, different types of applications across your business. Requests are transactional in nature. Once you complete them, they are done. And they really are all some form of add, change, or remove. In truth, there's probably only 8 or 9 actual request types. Services are durable and are delivered over time with expectations of availability, quality, and performance. Last, all requests are related to and are actionable against some service. Now, if you think this way, if you think service first, not request, which we believe is the natural way to do it, it simplifies things. It can bring real clarity, and it significantly reduces the size of the challenge we're facing. The number of services could be 1/5 to 1/10 the number of requests. So it's a nice way to think. It also puts it in the same order in which the customer wants to think about it. Our third key is on user experience. If it isn't a success to the customer, it isn't a success. Here are bad and good examples of a service catalog menu. And you can see how menus or service catalog menus cross all kinds of industries. It's not an IT-specific thing. The one on the left is too detailed, has no consistency across the options, has no natural flow, and leaves you wondering how you build and price your choice. The menu on the right is from the famous In-N-Out burger chain, in use for 50 years. It starts you on the upper left-hand side, where we're trained to start, then flows down, how we're trained to proceed. It puts a meal together how you would think. Burger first, then fries, then shake. No shake? A modified column 2 with a box to help you see it quickly, gives other drink options, then coffee or milk. So I ask you, do you see the 5 user experience design principles that we use at Evergreen and listed above at work in this successful menu? This is a big, big factor right here, key 4. Should we build a service or not? Since it takes time and money to build good services, we want to make sure it's worth it. We must weigh value versus cost and risk. And I will tell you from my experience over the last 4 years, most of my customers err on the side of building more services than they should, and way too many services that aren't worth actually having. They'd be better as custom requests. So here's how we look at this. On the value side, we should consider, is it worthwhile? Does it have a high intrinsic strategic or business value? Is it high volume? If we only do something 3 or 4 times a year, is it worth the effort to build a service around it? Is it highly repetitive? Well, if we do it a lot, but every time it's very different and we can't change that, then maybe it's not a good candidate. Is it simple and doesn't change a great deal over time? If so, it is easier to build a self-service solution and it will be viable for a longer period of time. Is it 80-20? And that's the real critical question here. What are the 3 to 5 things that are or could be the same in any area and meet 80% of the needs? This is what we're after, the 80-20. On the cost and risk side, what's the cost to build and run the service, not just build? Because it takes energy and time to run and maintain a service. How complex is it? What is the risk of failure? Now, failure could be a poor quality service, or it could be a service that costs 3 times what we estimated it would cost to build it. Excuse me. Our 5th key is building modular services and managing them as configuration items. It is important to apply a building block mentality to constructing services, then combine the blocks to create new services and variations of existing ones. If all your services are single-threaded, custom-built, they will be very expensive to create, impossible to maintain, and confusing to your customer. It just doesn't work. Think about Amazon. What would it be like if every Amazon department had its own checkout procedure? But this idea has its own challenges too. Each service module, say financial approval process, could be used in hundreds of services. So service configuration management is absolutely required, with each service being managed as a CI and mapped into any combined services of which it is a part. To our way of thinking, a service orientation brings a really valuable and really needed purpose to the CMDB. Now, this is a question that we get asked a lot. Should we build lots of simple services or a few big but complex services? Too many services may be confusing for the customer. Too big of a service can be a real load on IT to manage and measure, so it is a balancing act. Lots of things in customer service, portals and catalogs, and customer-centric and provider balance kind of activities are absolutely balancing acts. We start with what's important to the customer. We closely follow with what's best for the provider when we think about these things. George Miller was a researcher during World War II with a PhD from Harvard. In 1956, he published a theorem called Miller's number. It states that we humans can only handle 5 things error-free. By 9 things, error-free operation is very unlikely. So the sweet spot for acceptable error rate is 7 plus or minus 2. That's about what we can handle. And while technology continues to evolve at a very rapid rate, following Moore's law, our brains do not. Okay? We're not so different than the way George Miller described us 60 years ago. With that in mind, we know what our customer can handle area by area. Evergreen's numbers, you see below that, deal with the flow from the service taxonomy, which is how we organize the services, going down kind of like a Dewey Decimal System, right? We can go down level by level, right? Down to the actual service and the number of choices at each step. So our experience has led us to believe the number of levels through the taxonomy down to the service ought to be somewhere in the 4 to plus or minus 2 range. Could you have 7? Sure. 20? Probably not. But you can see how it works. Now, for number of choices, Miller's number has proven good with 7 plus or minus 2. So when we reach the end and get to the services, that also applies. So for any given major area, this helps you see how many services could be workable and manageable, which can help shape how large or small your service is. So this is one factor you consider, breadth and depth. Our last key, if we're going to build a consistent service design process, we must get it in use across IT. Otherwise, what's the point? That means we want people from all across IT to imagine and build the services they want to offer. And who better to do so, since these are the people who understand the services they're delivering. In order to do this, we must give them the process and enable their learning and use of it. Now, this can be accomplished through effective service governance and applying an underwriter's laboratory-like approach. We provide the tools and guidance on how to create a service. Then, once it's drafted, it's submitted for our review. We provide feedback on what still needs to be done to be compliant and to be improved. Once it is corrected, then the service can be given our UL-like seal of approval and promoted to the service catalog. A thin veneer, but an effective veneer. Why is this so important? Because poor, inconsistent services reflect poorly on us, not the ones who created them, because we are the owners of the service catalog. Okay, that's all for our presentation today. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he'll demonstrate some of the concepts we've talked about in our service portal and catalog solution.
Thank you, Don. So I'm going to start, as I oftentimes start, I'm going to start in the portal space, then we'll get into some of the service definition area as well. So I'm in kind of a self-service portal. This is where our consumers can go to get information about our services. They can submit requests and context to those services, as well as kind of track the status of those. I also want to highlight too, this is also a vehicle where we can push information to our consumers, whether that be announcements, prescription of information to their consumers, or alerts and outages. This particular kind of look and feel is one of our themes, though these can easily be kind of branded to fit company culture fit, or to blend in with other kind of sites that you might interact with, or the consumer might interact with, like an intranet site. I'm going to start kind of in the service information space, and so this kind of mega menu area, this is where I can go to see kind of a quick summary of our published services from kind of a taxonomy or a service listing kind of perspective. And kind of breaks it out in a couple different catalogs, but I can then drill into, say, a category area. And this is then going to take me to a list of services that are in that particular category. And this is kind of fitting on Don's point about Miller law. I've got just a few services to select from here. I've got a few categories I can kind of drill deeper into, and ultimately kind of drill in to see the different kind of services that are offered in this communication and collaboration kind of space. And again, some of the purpose for displaying these services is, one, to provide kind of transparency to our customers, clarify expectations, but also I think this can serve as a vehicle to kind of speak in the same terms as our customers, kind of align on labels, things that communication elements that they'll be used to seeing, and be able to kind of bridge that gap between, say, IT and our consumers. One other kind of perspective in this little area here is I have a list of services where I am I'm an active subscriber. So these are my services that I actively use and subscribe to, so if I want to hone in and look at those. I can also look at the services that are highest rated, and so this is based off of user feedback, user elements pushed in. If I go back to the top, one thing I want to kind of highlight here is a couple things that happen here at the top level. One is there are suggestions being made for me, and these are based off of a variety of factors, but based off of things like what's prescribed, what I've looked at recently, what I've ordered recently, and ultimately kind of pulling out the different services that are most relevant to me based off of my activities. You also see this kind of organization down here in terms of breaking into, say, different shared service spaces like HR versus IT. Right? But I can kind of organize these across my different areas. Right? So IT can have their catalog and services, HR can, legal can, sales can as well, and they all can be represented all in one kind of portal to consume. Let's go back and let's look at one of these services here. We'll just go to expense management. So I just want to kind of show you a little bit of the information you'll see, and this is, we affectionately call this kind of the service tombstone or service brochure. So some of the information that's being conveyed here, right, is what is the service, who is it available to, some of the requirements, some of those contacts, right, so owner, service manager. Any service can have multiple different offerings and or flavors of how it's delivered. Right, so this one has different offerings related to kind of roles or access levels within the particular service, and breaks out kind of what you get and also what commitments are being made as part of that particular offering. There is also a section of health, so I can see in this particular case there's some upcoming planned maintenance. I can also see that it's been up and available and usable for the last 5 days. And I can subscribe or unsubscribe to alerts and outages, so I can be informed of health-based activities related to this service. Here's where I can make some of those requests or actionable elements in context of this service. So I can make an enhancement request, I can make a role change request, I can request access. Right, there's also a section here for the feedback that's provided, some of the ratings that have been provided. Notice I can also add my own if I wanted to kind of contribute to that feedback. And because this service has commitments that are measurable-based commitments around availability, time to resolution, time to delivery, there's also some metrics that are being exposed here in terms of how well it's actually done or delivered to those particular deliverables over the last, say, 6 months. And there's some knowledge information that I can use to help better interact or get support with this particular service. And then on the right, you'll see some of the common actions I can perform, like submitting an idea, submitting that feedback, getting help, and or requesting access. And one thing I want to highlight on the request access, and this kind of hits on Don's point about the In-N-Out Burger kind of menu. You know, in these opportunities here, we're also you're kind of pushing answers or pushing information to our consumers to make it easy for them to order and consume these services. So one of the things that's happening, like on this particular form, is it's taking who I am and what my role is or position within the organization, and suggesting which kind of application role is maybe best suited for me. I can always change that and pick a different one, but it's in essence trying to take based off of who I am and my needs. Here's where, kind of the service or the service offering I am probably best suited to utilize as part of this. All right, so let me get to kind of the management part of this. So one of the things that we commonly use to kind of build out this kind of taxonomy is we use a mind mapping tool called XMIME. And one thing I want to highlight with that is that one of the things it'll spit out for us as we go through and kind of map those, it'll spit out kind of a CSV or an Excel list of that kind of taxonomy or hierarchy. And if it's big enough, we might use that to say, let's go ahead and just import that straight from XMIME. And the way it kind of works is you basically paste that file into here, analyzes it, looks at are there any catalogs we need to add as part of this data, are there any categories we need to add as part of that data, and are there any services we need to add as part of this as well. Notice in this case, the catalog already matched an existing item, the category already matched one, but all these services are all new. So I can go and kind of add and update these new services. Now really what this is going to do is going to kind of create kind of the shell or the service kind of part, but it's not going to put in all the details of the service. It's kind of building the structure from this kind of mind mapping software. One thing I'm going to do real quickly before I kind of show you the output of this, I'm going to kind of refresh some of our server data. Now one thing I want to highlight too about, so typically if we're going through kind of I guess a change to the service, changing an offering, or we're changing the description, usually we won't go through this XMIME load for those kind of changes, but rather we'll go through kind of a change management process, create a change record, update the service, communicate that it's being changed as part of that activity. So let me go back to home here, and I'm going to refresh the screen and see if our kind of new category structure has been updated here. So probably wouldn't have noticed it, but before I had in cloud applications I had 1. Now I actually have 12 in here, which is from my load of that new kind of spreadsheet of information. All right, so if I refresh this page here, all right, so here's my 12 new services that I've basically imported in. Now again, as you can see with these, they're basically just a title, description, and kind of that categorization information about what catalog and what category they belong to. So let's go and let me fill in. I'm going to actually focus in on this Litmos service, and we'll go fill in some of the details about this so you can kind of see some of how the attributes kind of bubble up to the portal output or portal Tombstone. So let's go to one of these services records. I'm going to go to this Litmos one. And so as you can kind of see, it's pretty blank at this point. So I can put in different information here, like I'll just give it an alias of LMS and give it an owner. I can adjust the owner's title, but I'm going to leave that blank for this purposes. I'll put in a managed by individual. I'll say this is kind of managed by our IT department. Kind of how we kind of price this or price the components is going to be on kind of a monthly allocation. So I'll do per unit of monthly. And then I'll put version is our spring 2017 version, and then I'll give it a support group, LMS support. And I'm actually just going to say it also contains some secure information like PHI and PII, which you'll see will kind of be highlighted to the users as part of that. For the description, let me just kind of copy and paste some information so you don't have to see me type. And I'll also do the same thing for kind of this at-a-glance information here, which notable, you can see this is, any of these can be HTML kind of components as well, so allows us to put some deeper formatting, links out to other components. Right? I can also outline who it's available to, which I'll say is available to IT, customer service, and finance. And then lastly, I'm going to relate this to a couple other services, like our identity management, which basically is going to show up for the users as a, as you're looking for this service, you might also want to look at these other services for other relevant information. And just to kind of complete this, let me throw a picture on here. All right, so that's kind of the starting point of my service. So we also go through the tab. There's an activity tab that outlines some of my changes. Another thing I want to do is I do want my service to be dependent on some other services. And I can do that through this CMDB relationships. So what I can do is basically say, in this case, I maybe have a dependency relationship between this service and another service. So I can do something like this and say, in the case of my Litmos service, it depends on our identity management service for authentication. So basically we log in and we authenticate users through our identity management service. And by making that relationship, we'll now see that we've got this kind of dependency map that's been generated as part of our service. Right, so here's our new service we created. It's dependent on this service, which is made up of some applications that run on a server and also depend on other services. Right? So now you might imagine If there's issues or impacts with some of these downstream components, they will be as upstream impacts to our newly created business service here. All right, so before I go there, let me also do a couple other things edit-wise on this particular service. So notice there's a service offerings section. In the interest of time, I'm not going to add all these. I've already kind of pre-created the offerings, but I'm just going to link them to my new service, and then I'll show you what they look like. So I'm going to link those. And so I did this kind of similarly to what I had in the expense management service, to where I have kind of a basic service offering that has a certain price, that has certain commitments being made, right? Also has some things that this is what's in scope, here's what's out of scope, what you get, what you don't get. And each of these offerings has some variance in terms of the price and what commitments are being made, as well as what you get and what you don't get. Right? All right, so the other tab I want to hit on here is, so there's an area where I can define what kind of requests I can submit in context to this particular service. And it may be that we have a service that's purely, there's no actions you can take on it, there's no help, it's just a service being provided, and we're going to show kind of what the commitments are. But in this particular case, I do want there actually to be requests that can be submitted. So I can submit a new request access kind of request, which is this using this default form. But I can also, one thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to augment kind of the workflow as some specific kind of setup activities that are unique to my service. Now I've already kind of set this up, but basically there's some workflow here that's unique to this Litmos service in terms of how we provision access to new subscribers. Then I'm going to change the button here to request access to, this is basically the label of the button. And then I can also, in this case, link other things that I want to make requestable. So I can put things like maybe I want to have an ask a question kind of catalog item here. I could even put something like, if I wanted to order an iPhone in context of this, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's really two ways I can do this. I can either kind of pick my specific items I want to make requestable, or I can link it to what's called a query or a filter. And this query filter is basically a dynamic way of looking at our catalog and saying, show me the items that match this criteria or condition, and then show me those as requestable forms or requestable items that I can submit in context to this. All right, so I think my service is pretty well complete here. One thing I'll also highlight in regards to these CI relationships, there is an area where you can define kind of how those relationships may impact kind of upstream to the parent service. And that's in this kind of dependency definition area. Some things I can do here, I can say I don't want to do any kind of outage spreading, which would mean that if there's an outage to one of those downstream components, it would have no impact to my service. If I turn this on, what we're basically going to have here is that these are the components that if I have an outage to this server or this identity management service, then my Litmos service will be impacted. And then the other thing I can do is I can kind of group some things together to say that these things collectively both have to be down, and I can also do exclusions to say certain things that are excluded from. So if this thing were to go down or have a degradation event, it would have no impact on our parent service. So since I'm here, let me kind of show you this in action. Let's go create a new incident. And I will put myself as the caller. And I'm going to put a server here. I'm going to say server is down. And if you remember, this is the server. I can also show you again in the mapping here, right? This is server that's kind of down here, right, that kind of impacts our new Litmos service that we have. And so when I go create an outage for this, just going to duplicate the message and say server is down. And then I'm going to say this began now. So what's going to happen now when I create this one outage record is it's basically going to broadcast itself across all the impacted services that are associated with this, and any of those specific offerings that are impacted by this. And this is mostly done, some of the offerings is done so that there's tracking against some of those availability targets that those offerings might have. you'll kind of notice that these are synchronized. So if I update this to, say, 8 a.m. this morning, you'll find that they all will adjust to that same time frame as well. All right, so that's now going to show you these on the portal side of the house. All right, so as a consumer of this service, I would now get alerts that this particular service is down. I've also got alerts of a whole bunch of other services that are down from this kind of core component that just went into an outage kind of state. And I come to this dashboard page. I can see that there are a number of services that are now impacted. If I want to hone in on my particular one that I just did, I can filter that by this name. I can see it's an outage. I can subscribe to that. All right, I can also see that it currently has a new outage that's been pushed in. All right, so let's take, now let's go to our service. Let's see how this kind of looks from a consumer perspective. So here's now kind of the output of that Tombstone that we created. All right, so I've got summary information about the service. I've got my available to information, my service owner information, classified as part of the cloud applications. There's where my 3 different offerings kind of get presented in terms of what you get, what you don't get, and the commitments that are being made as part of this. Health and status, see another view into the outage information, another place where I can subscribe to those updates, kind of see a full history of how it's performed. Then here's where those dynamic kind of query for what are the things you can request in context of this service get rendered. Right, so this provides me some catalog item forms that I can jump into, submit, add to cart, and order. Right, and since there were some targets related to the offerings, the metrics are shown as well. All right, let's go through and kind of request access to this service. I'll kind of show you how the workflow works on this particular item here too. So I'm going to go and just choose standard as the offering, and I'll put some additional details. And then I'll hit submit. So then I get kind of redirected to kind of the tracking page for this particular request, which I can then see is currently in a awaiting approval kind of state. As a consumer, I can also kind of see the stages and the steps of this process, which right now is pretty early, so there's not much detail being exposed. All right, and so what would happen here is now I would go over, if I go over as Alice Smith, right, she's got a new approval awaiting her, which shows up on her home page. Right, she could reject this or she could approve this. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. And then if I come back over here, if I refresh, it should be moving along in the process as it is. All right. Now just I'll highlight quickly here kind of how this particular process flows. So this particular request has a workflow that looks something like this. I can click on it. So in essence, there's a process to get that approval from the service owner, and this is where that specific kind of workflow that I defined on the service level is kind of evaluated to see, do I have a specific workflow for fulfillment of new access requests for this service? In this case, I did. So I came over here and it spawned that specific workflow, which was this access request for Litmos, which basically goes through and provisions a new account for me, kind of validates my access, sends me my account information, then prompts me for confirmation. So basically what I would do is this hooks into our identity management system. I would come out to my identity management system, see that I now have access to this software, launch it, I would kind of test it out, then I'd come back to the portal, basically provide my kind of feedback of either no, my access is not complete, it's not working like I expect, and therefore would then route as a work activity for someone to remediate, or if I say yes, my work here, my kind of work here is done in terms of this particular request and it's all closed out. A couple things on the closing on this particular process. If I go to kind of back to that Tombstone view, you'll see a couple things happen on the back end of this process. Is that I'm now subscribed to this particular service, so I'm now kind of hooked into this as part of the My Services section. It'll also highlight which service offering I'm currently consuming. And you'll notice it also subscribed me to health-based alerts, so that can be kept up to date if there were new outages or issues that come up with this particular service going forward. Another kind of closing part of this as well is it's going to kind of seek my feedback about how well this service is working for me. So it sent me a survey. I don't have to fill it out right away. It's kind of due in 29 days. Basically, I can come to the survey, put in a happy score, provide some feedback, and help the service owner kind of better manage, better deliver this particular service. And along those lines, if I'm the service owner also does get notices and alerts kind of as things are relevant or pertinent to their particular service. Right? So they get outage-based alerts, they get subscription-based alerts, and they get kind of a page where they can manage the health of their service, health of the dependent parts of their service, track to their dependencies. If there were feedback or service feedback, it would show up here on the right, and there's some area where I can make some management adjustments as well to kind of proactively stay on top of delivering this service and meeting my commitments and expectations. So I think that covers what I hope to cover. So I hope this was helpful in seeing kind of how ServiceNow can present the services as well as you can make requests and context to those services.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. A couple of points that come out of this and just thinking. You saw how Jeff linked services and sub-services. What are the providers that he's depending upon? And, we think, hey, we'd like to discover those things. Well, we can discover technology and we can discover relationships that exist, but we really can't discover a service and what its commitments are and what it's doing. And so more and more as we capture services and sub-services, that linking needs to occur at a level above the discovery layer. And the cool thing is, well, a lot of us don't have application discovery, but the application owner does know what he's depending upon or she's depending on, so they can create those linkages to help improve their performance right away. The other thing that's interesting is if you look at the access of applications, that's going to become more and more and more critical as we go from, hey, we've got these employees and they all get the same thing, to what if we have an ecosystem of hundreds or thousands of product-enhancing applications that fit within our governance and security compliance requirements, like we have on our iPhone or our Android. I think we're moving to a world like that, where we're going to give many, many more choices for enabling personal productivity. So these things will be very useful as we get there. So let's see. Let's go to the next slide here. Thank you. So here are some possible next steps if you found any of this interesting. Perhaps you're interested in our advanced self-service portal and catalog, which Jeff was demonstrating. It is the most viewed and most purchased app on the ServiceNow store, so that's pretty cool. It is available as a fully functioning self-service demo. It's fun, it's easy to use. There's over 1,000 people who have signed up to demo it. You can get your own login from our website and be using it in 5 minutes, or if you want to, you can download a demo version from the ServiceNow store. It's just not as populated with so many of these things we built into this as far as the ruffles and flourishes in the population of the services, but it is there as well. Or perhaps you're interested in establishing a better service catalog direction and roadmap. Maybe take a deeper look at we have an offering, a 2-week service portal and catalog strategy and roadmap engagement, and it is only it brings a tremendous amount of value. It's only $17,500, and we guarantee your satisfaction with it. We've been very successful with it. We've probably done it 30 times in the last 3 years. Or perhaps you're interested in a better way to meet your ServiceNow demand. Please feel free to check out our entirely new way of delivering services with Evergreen Evolve. So that is it for our presentation and demo today, and let's go to any questions we have, if we have any, Stephanie.
We do have some, and Don, I think the first one's probably for you.
Yay.
It says, it looks like the Evergreen service design process it says, Don and I are both fighting colds. Bear with me here. I've got enough cold medicine going on for both of us. It looks like the Evergreen service design process is built into ServiceNow. Is that the case?
Yes, it is, and that's a big part of what Jeff was showing. But what's interesting about that is that we also have the same process in a spreadsheet model and the mind mapping tool model. And that's because Jeff has great facility in building that service in the platform, and a team of people could develop that same facility over time, but you can imagine it might take them a little time, right? Because it's not a group exercise tool. But designing a good service is, right? It's the kind of thing where you need a group of people in the room that are looking at that service end-to-end so they can actually build it effectively, at least at the high level. And that's where a spreadsheet approach or kind of a mind mapping approach would be better tools to help that group, kind of more easily visualize the service and to make progress against that conversation. So yes, and yes, and yes.
Okay, great. And one more, Don, for you. Is the 2-week roadmap engagement how most of your customers get started?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that today in any detail, but yeah, it is. It's about 80% start that way. It's what we recommend because it brings a lot of value beyond the roadmap. Things like building a service taxonomy, which is the way you organize the services, like how do you use the service design process and building a number of services as examples in that process. But it really actually, even more importantly, the key thing it brings is the education to the core team. And every customer of ours has a core team of usually 4 to 6 people that are involved in this motion, this customer-centric motion. And it educates that team on how to think and communicate in a customer-centric way, which sounds really obvious and you would think we're all doing it, but in many cases it's hard to do because we are providers, right? So it's hard to think like the customer. And so we're looking at that customer in rather than IT out mindset. And that's a significant change, but once it happens, then everything else gets viewed differently as a result of it.
Okay, great. And Don, I had another one come in I think that's probably best for you. How long do you see it taking to define IT services start to finish?
That's a really good question too. That's a cool one because a pattern establishes over time with a group of people working on services and you hone it. And the first service may take really to get it end to end the way you like it. It might take 3 or 4 hours. I mean that would be a long time, right, for a team to do it. But then the next one takes half that time, and then the third one takes half of that time. And ultimately what we want to do is we want to build a consistent option set that support our services. Like if Jeff was going to pull down the SLA or an OLA for a service, we don't want 100 SLAs. Let's have 10, right? If we're going to have delivery times, let's have 10, not 100. Since we've done everything in a custom fashion, we can have way too many options, right, for things that we're doing. So we want to simplify and reduce those options. Yeah, so a pattern does start to build, though, and the speed goes way up in developing services because the group gains that sort of a synchronicity.
Great. Jeff, a couple for you. Is there a limit to the number of levels you can build in the service taxonomy?
So from a technical perspective, no. I mean, you could put as many levels as you want in the ServiceNow platform, and I think I don't think there's any limits in the mind mapping technology either for doing that. I think Don hit it earlier in terms of the Miller rule, right? You want it from a user perspective. We don't want to make it too cumbersome for them to drill too deep, have to go down too many levels, or to see too many things in one level, right? So I think that's the balancing act, is trying to keep things to where I'd say most cases we see maybe 2 to 3 levels as far as the depth of kind of the branches in the taxonomy, and then maybe 4 or 5 items per kind of level as you get into it.
Okay, great. Another one for you, Jeff. Do we need a CMDB to provide service help?
Not necessarily. I mean, so some of what I demoed today in terms of having an outage created for a server and then have it impact the services that depend on that server, some of those are going to be somewhat hard to do if you don't have CMDB and the relationships there. But there are ways in which you could just create say an outage record directly against the service. So if someone's reporting in through a call or an email or through an alert, you could go in and basically create an outage record directly against the service and in essence deliver the same output to the consumer, but you wouldn't get it through kind of the automatic cascading relationship kind of activity way.
Okay, Okay, great. And one last call out there for questions. If you all have any, please put them in the chat or the questions panel. Jeff, one more for you. In regards to user experience, service design, and definition and orchestration, is there one we should do first?
So good question. I'd say certainly, big bang approaches tend to not work too well in terms of trying to do everything at one time. I would say, we tip to on our projects try to break things up into kind of more manageable chunks. And seek kind of the biggest bang for your buck in the first kind of activities to kind of build momentum. But I don't think you would do one versus the other. I don't think you would do just the user experience without any service definition or design and no orchestration. So we usually see a little bit of all kind of being broken up into chunks and doing some of the key services first, along with the service, along with the user experience, and using that as a way to kind of drive the program forward.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions, so a couple things I'd like to highlight. We do have another webinar coming up on May 31st. Invitations will start going out tomorrow. Also, at any time, you can check the resources page at evergreensys.com for recordings of past events, as well as links to register for our upcoming webinars, as well as our workshop series. We are running workshops across the country on both Service Catalog and CMDB configuration and asset management in a number of cities. So you definitely want to check that resources page, see if we're in the city near you. Those are complimentary to qualified prospects and customers. So thanks again for attending. Keep an eye out for the emails tomorrow with your recording link and the slides, and we hope you join us again on May 31st. Thanks.